Have you ever walked away from someone and felt a storm of questions hit you all at once? Did you wonder if it was the right move? Did you fear what they might do? Did you doubt your own heart? Tonight, we are going deep. We are pulling back the curtain on something most people never talk about. We are looking at the stages of regret a narcissist goes through after you finally choose yourself. This is not about revenge. This is not about getting an apology. This is about understanding the truth. Stay with me here, because by the end of this, you will see why walking away was never loss. It was the bravest move you ever made. And if this resonates, stick around until the very end, because the last part changes everything. Walking away is often misunderstood. From the outside, it looks like abandonment, it looks cold, it looks like giving up too fast. But the truth is far deeper than that. Walking away is not about leaving someone behind. It is about finally refusing to leave yourself behind. It is the moment survival turns into self-respect. It is when endurance finally gives way to dignity. For a long time, staying felt like the strong choice. You stayed through confusion. You stayed through emotional exhaustion. You stayed through broken promises. You stayed through self-doubt. You told yourself love needs patience, sacrifice, and understanding. And maybe it did, until the cost became your voice, your peace, and your sense of self. Walking away happens when your body and your soul quietly agree that staying any longer would mean betraying yourself. That choice is not impulsive. It grows from countless moments of trying, hoping, and enduring more than you should have. Walking away takes courage because it goes against everything we were taught. We were taught to fix things. We were taught to hold on. We were taught to prove our value through loyalty. So leaving feels like failure. It feels like we did something wrong. But true courage is not staying in places that hurt you. True courage is seeing the moment when love has turned into a battlefield and choosing to walk out, even when your heart still aches. It takes bravery to step into the unknown with no safety net. There is no applause waiting for you on the other side, no instant relief. Often there is grief, there is loneliness, there is fear, but there is also something powerful taking root. Trust in yourself. Walking away is a statement. It says, I matter enough to protect my own well-being. It is an act of self-rescue, not rejection. When you walk away, you are not abandoning someone else. You are ending the long abandonment of yourself. And that choice, even though it hurts, becomes the foundation for healing, clarity, and a life where you no longer have to disappear in order to belong. Keep this in mind, because what happens next is where it gets really interesting. And once you have chosen yourself, once you have stepped out of survival mode and into self-respect, something else quietly unfolds, something they never prepared for, because while you were learning how to breathe again, they were starting to feel something unfamiliar, a loss of control. A narcissist's regret is rarely born from love. It is born from a loss of power. They do not miss the warmth of your presence. They miss the certainty of your availability. You were the constant. You were the reassurance. You were the mirror that made them feel admired and untouchable. When you walked away, that supply vanished, and with it went the illusion that they were always in charge. This is why their pain looks different. It is not soft or tender. It is confusion. It is irritation. It is bruised ego. It is disbelief. They do not ask, how did I hurt them? They ask, how could they leave me? The wound strikes the identity they carefully built, the belief that they are irreplaceable, the belief that there are no real consequences for what they do. Your departure pierces that belief in a way no argument ever could. They may replay old moments, not to grow, but to find leverage. They are searching for where they lost their grip. They are scanning for the move they miscalculated. Regret for them is strategic before it is emotional. It revolves around control slipping away, not compassion waking up. And here is the quiet power in that truth. Your healing is not dependent on their realization. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the moment you stop begging to be seen, the moment you stop negotiating your own worth, you reclaim something priceless. You reclaim your autonomy. When control disappears, reality steps in. And reality is merciless to illusion. Your absence becomes the message. It says what words never could. You no longer consent to being managed. You no longer consent to being minimized. You no longer consent to being manipulated. And in that space where their power used to live, your freedom begins to grow. Watch how this unfolds, because the next part is even more revealing. And when control is gone, when manipulation no longer works, and your freedom becomes undeniable, something unexpected steps in to take its place. Silence. Not the quiet that feels empty to you, but the quiet that feels unbearable to them. Because silence becomes a mirror. And for someone who has spent a lifetime avoiding reflection, that mirror is merciless. Your absence removes the noise they leaned on, the reactions, the explanations, the emotional work you once offered so freely. Without it, there is nowhere to send the discomfort, no one to blame in real time, no one to absorb the emotional overflow, and in that quiet, they are left alone with themselves, not the polished image they show the world, not the story they tell to survive, just the cracks they worked so hard to hide. This is where the unraveling begins, not loudly, not all at once, but deep inside. The silence forces moments of awareness they cannot escape. Late nights stretch longer. Small victories feel strangely flat. Conversations with others feel shallow. And slowly, an unsettling thought creeps in. The problem did not leave when you did. It just lost its favorite distraction. Silence does not accuse. It does not argue. It does not demand accountability. And that is exactly why it is so powerful. It reflects. It echoes. It amplifies. Every unresolved insecurity, every buried fear, every fragile belief about their own importance grows louder in the empty space where you used to be. Meanwhile, on the other side of that silence, you are learning something profound. You are learning that peace does not need an explanation. You are learning that you owe no closure to someone who refused to listen. You are learning that your quiet is not cold or cruel. It is self-protection. They may call your silence a punishment. They may call it cruelty, but it is simply the natural result of your growth. You are no longer pouring emotional fuel into someone who never planned to meet you halfway, and as the silence deepens, it begins to do something irreversible. It separates the illusion from the truth, because once the noise fades, the truth finally has room to speak. And for the first time, they are forced to hear it, even if they do not yet understand what it is telling them. Stay with me here, because this is the turning point. And as that truth starts to echo in the quiet, something inside them begins to crack. Not the heart, not yet, but the image they spent years protecting. Because before a narcissist ever feels emotional pain, their ego has to break first. The ego is the armor. The ego is the stage. The ego is the story they keep telling themselves to survive. And silence has a way of cracking armor without ever touching it. They start to feel it in small ways, a defensiveness that rises faster than it used to, a sudden need to prove themselves to people they once ignored, a sharp irritation when praise does not land the way it once did. What is breaking is not love, it is the illusion of invincibility. Your absence has stripped them of the role they were playing, and without an audience that believed in it, the performance starts to fall apart. This is the stage where confusion turns inward. They may still blame you. They may still justify everything they did. But underneath the story, something has shifted. Doubt, a question they have avoided their whole life, is starting to rise. What if I am not the person I thought I was? That question is terrifying, because the ego was never built to handle honesty. It was only built to handle control. And this is why their reactions start to swing. One moment they act superior and totally unaffected. The next moment they seem defensive, bitter, or strangely hollow. The ego is scrambling to rebuild itself, to assert dominance again before deeper emotional truth surfaces. Because once the heart starts to feel, accountability is not far behind, and accountability has never been safe territory for them. While this internal fracture unfolds, you are standing in a completely different place. You are no longer looking for validation in someone else's eyes. The pieces of yourself that were once bent to fit their ego are slowly realigning. You are learning that your worth does not need an audience. You are learning that your peace does not need permission. Their ego breaks because it was never built on truth. Yours rebuilds because it finally is. And in that contrast lies the real turn, the moment where their unraveling speeds up and your healing becomes impossible to ignore. If this is landing for you, hold on, because the next part is where everything falls into place. And once the ego has cracked and the performance can no longer hold, the final stage arrives quietly, not with apologies, not with real change, but with a deep emptiness they do not know how to escape. This is where regret finally settles in, not as remorse, not as real accountability, but as a haunting awareness that something essential is gone and cannot be brought back. They look around. They start to notice that connections feel shallow now. Conversations skim the surface. Admiration fades faster than it used to. No one reflects them with the depth you once did. And in that realization, a hard truth begins to take shape. They did not just lose a person. They lost a presence that made their world feel more real. The regret is not loud or dramatic. It is heavy. It is the slow knowing that what they had with you was rare, and they did not know how to protect it. This regret lingers because it arrives too late. Growth would have required humility, and humility never felt safe to them, so instead of evolving, they circle the loss. They replay memories not to understand, but to soothe the emptiness. They may reach out, they may test the water, they may search for familiar energy, but what they are really hunting for is a version of themselves that only existed when you were still around. Meanwhile, something extraordinary is happening in your life. You are no longer defined by what you survived. The clarity you gained has replaced the chaos you once called normal. You are learning that closure does not come from hearing the right words from the wrong person. It comes from finally trusting your own experience. Their regret becomes a silent weight they will carry forward. Your freedom becomes a foundation you will build upon. And in the end, the most powerful shift of all takes place. You no longer need them to understand what they lost. You understand what you found in yourself. And as you stand firmly in what you found, an unexpected ripple moves outward. Your healing does not stay quiet. It does not announce itself, but it is felt. And this is where the story turns in a way they never anticipated. Your growth becomes the very thing that speeds up their unraveling. Nothing unsettles a narcissist more than watching the person they once diminished rise without them. Your peace exposes what chaos once hid. Your boundaries highlight the absence of theirs. Your quiet confidence, rebuilt from honesty, reflects back everything they avoided becoming. You are no longer reacting, no longer explaining, no longer defending, and that lack of access is deeply destabilizing. They may hear that you are thriving. They may hear that you are smiling differently. They may hear that you are living more fully, and instead of pride or happiness, it stirs something darker, a mix of envy, a mix of confusion, a mix of disbelief. Because the story they told themselves depended on you staying broken without them. Your healing dismantles that story completely. What they feel is not admiration, it is exposure. Your evolution reminds them that change was always possible, and they chose not to take it. Every step you take forward quietly asks a question they cannot answer. Why could I not grow too? And that question deepens the emptiness that regret already planted. Meanwhile, you are no longer measuring your progress by their reaction. You understand now that healing is not loud. It is consistent. It is waking up without dread. It is trusting your gut again. It is choosing yourself without guilt. And with every grounded choice you make, the gap between you grows wider. You did not heal to make them feel anything, but your healing is undeniable proof that the problem was never your worth. It was the dynamic. And as you rise, their illusion collapses further, because growth has a way of showing exactly where someone chose to stay stuck. Do not stop here. The next part ties it all together. And as that distance widens, as your healing continues without permission or apology, something fundamental shifts in the balance of power. Not through confrontation, not through revenge, but through your quiet refusal to explain yourself anymore. This is the moment the dynamic truly breaks. For so long, you were the one translating your pain into words they could dismiss. You softened your boundaries. You justified your feelings. You over-explained your needs, hoping clarity would finally lead to care. But clarity never created safety. It only gave them more information to use against you. When you stop explaining, you cut off their access to your inner world. And without access, control collapses. They feel it immediately. The questions they once asked to probe, not to understand, no longer get answers. The emotional hooks they use to pull you back in no longer land. Your calm feels unfamiliar. Your detachment feels like rejection. Not because you are cruel, but because you are no longer available to be managed. This is where power truly shifts. Not when they regret, not when they reach out, but when you realize you do not need to convince anyone of your reality. You stop trying to be believed. You start standing in what you know. That certainty changes how you speak, how you move, how you respond, and sometimes how you choose not to respond at all. They may treat your silence as arrogance or indifference, but what it really is sovereignty. You have reclaimed authorship of your own story. You are no longer begging for understanding from someone who was invested in misunderstanding you. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. The chaos you once carried begins to fade. Your nervous system settles. Your intuition sharpens. You start to recognize how much energy was spent trying to be heard in a place that benefited from keeping you confused. The power did not shift because they lost interest. It shifted because you stopped participating in a dynamic that needed your self-doubt in order to survive. And once that happens, there is no going back, only forward, grounded, free. And as you move forward, grounded in that freedom, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. The one that finally breaks the illusion you once carried. What they miss was never the depth of who you are. It was the role you played in keeping them afloat. They do not ache for your soul. They do not ache for your complexity. They do not ache for your truth. They ache for the supply, the attention, the validation, the patience, the emotional fuel that once flowed so easily from you. This realization is not bitter. It is liberating. Because it explains why being fully yourself never felt safe with them. Your needs disrupted the transaction. Your boundaries interfered with the exchange. The more human you became, the more distant they grew. And now, in your absence, what they feel is not heartbreak, it is withdrawal. They search for replacements. They scroll for new sources. They charm easily. But nothing satisfies in the same way. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. And realness cannot be replicated by someone who is only looking to consume. They may mimic connection. They may move quickly. They may wrap the next person in charm. But the emptiness persists. What they lost was not love, it was access. Understanding this changes how you see the entire past. You stop romanticizing the struggle. You stop asking whether you were too much or not enough. You see clearly that your empathy was never met with reciprocity, because reciprocity was never the goal. Supply was. And in this clarity, your self-blame dissolves. You realize that the exhaustion you carried was not a flaw. It was evidence of imbalance. You were pouring into something that could not pour back. And once you stop being the source, the system collapses. This truth gives you something priceless. Emotional freedom. You no longer wait for them to miss you in the way you miss them. You no longer measure your value by their inability to love deeply. You understand now that they miss what you gave, not who you are, and that understanding releases you from needing to ever return. And once you see this truth clearly, that they miss what you gave and not who you are, something inside you finally settles. The endless waiting for an apology, for an explanation, for a single moment of recognition begins to fade. Because you realize that closure was never something they could hand you. Closure was never locked inside their understanding. It was always waiting inside your own clarity. For a long time, you believed peace would come when they admitted what they did, when they named the hurt, when they finally took responsibility. But that hope kept you tethered to their limitations. You were waiting on someone who avoided accountability to suddenly offer it as a gift. And the longer you waited, the longer you postponed your own healing. Clarity changes that. Clarity does not rewrite the past. It contextualizes it. It lets you see patterns instead of isolated incidents. It lets you see dynamics instead of excuses. You stop asking, why was I not enough, and start recognizing this was never built to hold me. That understanding brings a quiet kind of closure, the kind that does not need agreement to be real. You no longer need them to confirm your pain because you trust your own experience now. You no longer replay conversations hoping for a different outcome. You accept what was without minimizing what it cost you. And in that acceptance, the old emotional knots begin to loosen. Closure through clarity means you stop chasing resolution from the very source of the confusion. You reclaim your energy, you redirect your focus, you stop reopening old wounds just to prove they exist. The truth stands without argument. And as you step into this final phase of understanding, something inside you feels lighter. Not because the experience did not matter, but because it no longer defines you. Their silence, their denial, their lack of apology no longer hold power over you. You have named your own reality, and that naming becomes the ending you were waiting for. Strong, self-honoring, complete. And once you have claimed that clarity, once you no longer need their validation or their apology, the most profound transformation takes root. Your freedom. This is the culmination of every step you have taken, every boundary you have drawn, every ounce of courage you have gathered to walk away. Freedom is not just the absence of them. Freedom is the presence of yourself, fully and unapologetically. For so long, your energy, your emotions, even your identity were borrowed by someone who never planned to return them whole. You adapted, you softened, you shrunk. Not because it was wrong to love, but because the love was conditional, transactional, never truly reciprocal. And now, in this space where their influence no longer reaches, you are reclaiming what was always yours, your voice, your joy, your power. Freedom feels different from relief. Relief is temporary. It is a short pause from the chaos. Freedom is enduring. It is waking up without tension in your chest. It is making decisions without second-guessing yourself. It is knowing that your worth does not rest on anyone else's perception, their moods, or their approval. Every step away from them reinforces this truth. You are whole. You are independent. You are unshakable. And the beauty of this freedom is that it is active, not passive. You are no longer defined by what was taken from you, but by what you choose to create. Your time, your love, your energy. These belong solely to you now. You are free to grow, free to dream, free to connect authentically without having to compromise who you are. In that freedom lies your ultimate lesson and your quiet gift. You are not here to fix anyone. You are not here to wait for anyone. You are not here to shrink yourself for anyone. You are here to live fully, courageously, and truthfully. And in that living, you show the world and yourself that leaving was never loss. It was liberation. So here's the truth I want you to carry with you long after tonight. Every stage of regret a narcissist goes through after you walk away is not about you failing. It is not about them realizing what they lost. It is about the natural consequence of a relationship built on imbalance, control, and one-sided energy. Their regret is loud at times. It is messy. Sometimes it even looks dramatic. But it is never yours to fix. What belongs to you is clarity. What belongs to you is healing. And above all, what belongs to you is freedom. Imagine for a moment what it feels like to step into a life where your worth is no longer negotiable, where your peace is non-negotiable, where your boundaries are respected not because you demand it, but because you honor yourself. That life is waiting on the other side of the decision to stop explaining, stop performing, stop shrinking. It is waiting the moment you choose yourself over the chaos, your soul over their control, your truth over their illusion. And here is the quiet paradox. While they are unraveling, chasing pieces they once took for granted, you are ascending. Every smile you reclaim, every boundary you hold, every quiet victory in your own life reminds you that their regret is not your burden. It is simply proof that you were never meant to stay in a cage built for someone else's comfort. You were meant to walk freely. You were meant to shine fully. You were meant to create a life that does not require anyone else's permission to exist. So if you have ever doubted the power of walking away, carry this with you. Leaving is not loss. Leaving is liberation. Leaving is the first brave act in a life where you are finally the author, the hero, and the witness of your own story. And that story, your story, is unstoppable. Let it unfold. Let it shine. Let them watch, because you are already free.